Hello and welcome to the BinSense live online tour brought to you by Flaman Sales. My name is Mark, and today I'm going to be showing you the features and functions of BinSense Online. And we'll start by logging in. If you can navigate to my.binsense.com and enter in the appropriate username and password for your account, we'll get started. Once logged into your BinSense Live account, on the left-hand pane, we will see Sites, Inventory, Dashboard, User Manuals, Site Report, Preferences, Checklist, and Logout. Throughout this tour, we'll be going through each one of these pages individually, starting with Sites, the page that we're on right now. First and foremost, what you're going to notice is the bin site laid out accurately with the different sizes of bins oriented in the correct order. At Flaman Sales, when we normally set up a site for the first time, it is that north is facing upwards on the page and south is oriented to the bottom. Next, if we hover over some of these bins on this page, it'll give us a brief descriptor of which bin we're looking at, as well as the grain type set for that bin. At the top of the page, we see an edit function where we can change the sizes of the bins and make other adjustments, such as changing the name. And below that, we have the sensor report. If you click on the sensor report, it's going to download a spreadsheet that will show you all in one page, pretty much, the different values of the temperature and or moisture values within the sensors of every bin on that site. This is an example of the sensor report spreadsheet. At the top, it'll show the home site, the name of the site, with the date and time of the last call-in. Below that, we'll be able to see the bin information. As we scroll through, we can see in one page all of the values reporting in from the system. Underneath where it says negative 5.5 Celsius in this cell, it says no data. Normally, if you had moisture cables in your bins, it will show the moisture content percentage right here. The other thing to note is that in this column, it's showing the information for one cable. If you had multiple cables in a bin, it will display additional columns to the right of that first column for as many cables as you have in one of your bins. At the top of the site page, we see a drop-down menu. If you have more than one BinSense Live site, it'll show the different sites here, and you can navigate between them. Alternatively, from any page within BinSense Online, you can hover over the Sites tab on the left, hover over the site that you would like to navigate to, and you can even drill in and select a bin individually. Below that, we have the scale. So right now we're set to each block representing 30 by 30 feet. We can change this to 50 feet. We can also go up to 150 feet for some of those much larger sites. The legend to the right shows some of the things that you might see on this site page. Typically, we're going to see the storage options being either bins or grain bags, and we also have landmarks that we can put in as well to help navigate the page. If a bin is grayed out, that simply means that it's an unmonitored bin. And on these bins, where we see grain level here in the right-hand side, that'll show the approximate grain level within that bin at the time of the last reading. Green bins show no to low risk. A yellow bin might indicate a medium risk. And if you see a red bin, that might be an issue caused by heating or moisture going up. These little wireless bars coming off of each of the bins that you'll notice, they all show up in synchronization with each other. That means that the bin is being monitored by wireless. And if you see an X over the bars indicated as right here, that means that that bin's communicating device is not called in for 6 hours or more. The M on a bin indicates the bin where a master unit sits. And on this page, that bin is right here, bin number 22. If you do have fan controls installed on some or all of your bins, you will see fan indications off to the side of each bin. For fan off, fan on, fan start and stop, or if you have a fan error, it will indicate this symbol right here. Now we'll go ahead and open up the bin view page. You'll see a couple of things here. First, we have the bin details. This is going to show the name of the bin, the grain type within that bin. This can be set to any other grain type at any time. We'll see the grain volume and bin capacity. This stuff we'll go over a little bit more in depth on the dashboard page. We see the grain moisture manual input. And then we have our notifications panel. We can either disable the notifications entirely, or we can use CGC notifications, which follow the Canadian Safe Storage Guidelines. And essentially, if you have a moisture cable installed in the bin along with temperature, the CGC option will automate the notifications based on if your bin is in safe mode, if it's close to spoilage mode, or if it's in full-on spoilage mode. Here we have our low and high thresholds available because we're in the thresholds notification type. Essentially, if the grain temperature in any one of the sensors goes below or above these thresholds, you'll receive a notification by email or SMS text message. Below that, we have our weekly temperature rise, and right now it is set to 2 degrees for this bin. If the temperature rises by 2 degrees Celsius or more within a 1-week time frame, you will receive a notification. Below, we have a minimum temperature. To the right of this column here, we have some information. The last reading being January 4th, 2021 at 12:19 p.m. This will update every 68 minutes. We can see the battery level of the communicating device on top of the bin, in this case, the master unit. And then we also have the ambient outside temperature. We can navigate from the side view to the top-down view. This may be helpful if you have multiple cables installed on one bin. Then we also have a table view that we can activate that'll pop up as well to show us all of the values at the same time on one page. If you have a moisture cable installed on the bin, where it says T on each of these sensors, that will actually be indicated by an M. And we'll show you that now. Here we've got a bin view page of a multi-cable bin with a couple of moisture cables installed on it. Now we see that on the graph we have the blue line indicating the moisture content in a percentage, as well as the temperature below that. On the legend of the graph, we have our temperatures on the left-hand side and the moisture values on the right, with time being at the bottom. When you open this page, it's going to show a 1-week span. However, we can bring this up to show a 1-month span, or even 3 months. And if you need a temperature or moisture content display in a different date range, we can set custom dates on the bottom. So we have a start date and an end date here. From the top-down view of this bin, this is what it would look like to us. And in our table view, we're seeing a lot more information. If you're receiving notifications for a sensor that might be thought of by the system to be, covered by grain, but maybe isn't, or maybe there's some weird temperature variation going on, you can actually manually expose or disable sensors simply by clicking on that sensor and then selecting either cover this sensor, disable this sensor, expose all, or cover all if the bin is full. Below the notifications panel, we here see a fan status. It'll show the current fan status being off or on. We can also set a run timer, and then we can turn the fan on. At the very bottom of the bin view page, you can enter bin notes or events simply by entering the date, selecting the event type, and then entering the text in the field in the right. Two last things to note about the bin view page. On the left-hand side of the column, we see our temperatures right now ranging from 11 Celsius to 14.5 Celsius. If you change the date range selected from 1 week to 1 month, we will see these values at the top and the bottom potentially change. This is to show more of the information in the graph that's necessary for that time frame. Some users might get a little confused when they're looking at, say, a graph of 3 months, which is showing a lot of temperature change down to 1 week, and they might see that temperature change as being just as much as it was on the previous page. However, the values on the left-hand side have changed as well. The second thing is under the set date range option, we also have a drop-down menu where we can see on the graph different things. We can also see a really helpful tool here is the master or remote unit voltage. Once clicked, it will show us the voltage at that particular call-in time on this graph. The voltage call-in happens once a day for all units on site. We can even open this up to 3 months to get a little bit more historical data to see what the charging pattern of that device looks like. The next page we're looking at is the inventory page. Once you have the grain type set for each bin individually, it'll show the types of grains that you have stored at each site, as well as the different bins that that grain is stored in, and how much of the grain is in each bin. It'll show minimum temperature for those different types of grains, the average temperature, the maximum temperature, the moisture content, and the average moisture. If you were to click on each of these tabs individually, it'll bring in a drop-down menu to show you which bins have which types of grains in them and of how much. On the dashboard page, we see a few different columns of information. And primarily, this is a page where you can make a lot of different changes to all of your bins without having to navigate into each bin individually. We have a structure tab indicating the bin you are making changes for. We have a current grain volume that can be set with a manual setting. We have a total bin capacity that can be set with a manual setting. And then we have all of our alerts. Here we have an option to set alerts for off for each of the bins. We can set weekly temperature rises. And then we can also switch between alerts on and off for certain bins. The alerts may be voltage, exposed or covered alerts, auto muting sensors, and that sort of thing. We can filter between sites up in the top left or different types of grain. If you wanted to say set a bunch of settings for all of the bins that have one type of commodity in them, then what we can do is we can uncheck the other grains that don't apply to that field. Once that is made, we can select apply bulk changes to make changes to all of those bins with those grains in them at once. Once we hover over the user manuals tab, we see user manual options for BinSense Live, BinSense Direct, and then some of the other components that BinSense offers. Under the live guides, we have the quick start guide, the full user guide, the RF channel setting guide, the battery replacement guide, which is a very important one, and we also have the LED diagnosis guide. The LED diagnosis guide is very helpful if you are changing batteries in a remote unit and you want to be able to read the LED diagnostic that the remote or master unit is giving you once it picks up the cable and to confirm the channel that it's set to. The BinSense Direct guides would be applicable to BinSense Direct handheld users. And then we have a fan controller electrical installation guide. This is useful for an electrician if they are going to be wiring a fan control into a fan. Here we have our site report page. This is often one of the more overlooked, but very, very helpful tools in assessing and also maintaining your BinSense Live wireless system. We have a few different columns. We have the structure, which shows the bin name. We have the remote column, which shows the serial number of the communicating device hooked up to that bin. We have the date it was first associated. We have the voltage from the last voltage call in, which is in the next column. And then we also have the last cable call in. Two additional tabs. We have one for however many temperature cables are installed in that bin, and then we have a tab as well for moisture cables installed in that bin. On the far right, we'll have notes associated with each bin. If the notes column is left blank, that means that all should be well with that bin. A few things to note on this page. If you were to see a last voltage call in from, let's say, maybe days, weeks, even months ago. However, we see a last cable call-in time within a couple of hours. That typically means that the remote unit on one of your bins might be still operating off solar energy, and it is still relaying its information to the master unit. So in a case like that, we might see a note that says, replace batteries or voltage is low or something to that effect. If we see a last cable call-in on the flip of the coin with maybe a call-in time of, it could be days, weeks, or even several months ago. However, we're seeing a last voltage call-in within that same day. That'll typically indicate that the communicating device has lost a connection with the cable or cables inside of that bin. That could be simply a wiring issue, or it could mean a dead cable, or a number of a few other things. But typically, that would be an indicator that the communicating component of the wireless system is working just fine. It's an issue generally with the wiring or the cable itself that it's not able to read. Here we have a bin note that says, this bin has not reported its cables since 2021-01-04, or 94 minutes ago, compared to the 26 minutes ago of the other bins. And I'll show you why this is popping up. Within BinSense 2.0 and any new system installed, there's a battery saving function within the remote units. And if we scroll right to the bottom of the page, we can see this graph. This is the remote communication summary for the last 48 hours, and it's going to show each of the individual call-in times for each of the bins within those 48 hours. Some bins show 100%, some bins show 90%, and one even shows 59%. What's happening here is every time the remote unit needs to relay its information to the master unit, it takes a certain amount of battery power to do so. In an event to help reduce the battery power used, if a remote unit on a bin has not recorded a change in any of the temperature or moisture values within that call-in cycle, it will simply report back same to the master unit. And that uses a lot less battery. So down here on this bin number 10, we see that we had a bunch of instances where there was one cable being reported, and then there was a gap. And then we see a cable reported, and then another gap. And this can even happen up to 4 or 5 different gaps in time before the master unit will force the remote to relay its information. So up here, if we scroll back up, where it says this bin has not reported its cables, this isn't immediate cause for concern. It could just mean that that remote unit didn't have or recognize any temperature or moisture changes within that cable. And so it basically just told the master unit same. And that's all the master unit is telling us. On this graph, if we were to see stretches where it's not reporting a cable for more than 4 or 5 call-ins, then there might be a problem with the remote unit gathering information from the cable and relaying that information back to the master unit. Just above this, we'll see our temperature and moisture sensors with how many active sensors are hooked up to the system. This is essentially the sensor count for the whole system. Below that, we'll see the cable type with temperature and moisture, and we'll see 27 active cables on this site with no moisture cables. Here's the site report of a site that may be experiencing some issues. For bin number 32, for example, we see that the voltage is 1.15 volts as last reported. The last voltage call-in time was 43 hours ago, meaning that the voltage call-in from yesterday, which would have been 19 hours ago, as indicated by the other bins on site, is not completely accurate. The last cable call-in time for that bin was simply 5 minutes ago, meaning that that remote unit is still operating off solar energy. Also, we see that on bin number 35, we have a voltage of 5.04 volts. The last voltage call-in was 19 hours ago. However, it hasn't reported a cable since 63 days ago. So the flag for this bin is showing this bin has not reported its cable since 2020, November 1st. This would be a case where we might want to rectify the wiring between the communicating device on that bin, being the remote unit, and the cable itself, or we could possibly have a dead cable. For the bins that display a low voltage, however, are calling in within a recent time, the flag simply states replace batteries, Here we see the preferences page. We have the account information on the top left with the name, address, company name, and then we have the user information on the right with the contact phone number, contact email address, and then the dealer who set them up. Down here, we have the Allow Dealer to View Sites tab, either on or off. On meaning that as a dealer, we can see your site report, we can drill into your bin views to see what's happening within your bins, and to give you general service relating to your BinSense Live system. Below that, we have the BinSense notification preferences. You can add new alert phone numbers or new alert email addresses as displayed on the left. At the very bottom, we have our preferred language, preferred time zone, and then we also have some other values. For height, we have feet or meters. Temperatures, we have Celsius or Fahrenheit. And then for the grain volume, we also have tons or bushels that you can set. This would need to be updated for the changes to be made. And at the very bottom, you can change or update your account password. On the very last tab, we have the user checklist. Essentially, the system will notice things that might need to be updated or changes to be made to your site to fully update the site. This can range from setting your latitude and longitude on the map for us to be able to view. It might be verifying your contact information. You could verify your alert phone numbers or email addresses to make sure that they're working properly. You could even verify if moisture offsets are required for bins with moisture cables. If the system recognizes that there is a bin with a moisture cable installed but there is no grain type set, it will alert you here. Anyway, it's a really handy tool to go through and make sure that your whole site is set up properly. You can also download the BinSense mobile application from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. Simply search BinSense Mobile and download the app. Once you get logged in, this is what you'll see. You'll be able to see the total number of bins that you have monitored. You'll have the option to use a direct handheld if you so please. And then as we start scrolling through the bins, we'll notice that most of these are empty. However, I believe that bin 10 has some grain in it. So it'll show that the threshold is okay for the temperatures. It'll also show the approximate grain volume inside of the bin. Once we click on that bin, it brings us to the summary. Here you can change the name or the grain type or even the grain volume in bushels. You can set your grain moisture manual content at the very bottom and simply hit update to save the changes. If we tab over to the heat map, this will display some weird information. It's probably just the recording software that I'm using. But we've got the temperatures down the center at each 4-foot spacing in the cable. And at the very bottom, it shows the grain type that's inside of the bin. We have the option on the left-hand side to click on the graph to show the graph information. Or we can see the table with the rise or fall in temperatures or moistures over the last week. On the right, we have buttons for cover all and expose all sensors. This would be if we wanted to cover or expose the sensors in the bin, similar to how we did on the desktop version of the site. I'm going to go back over to notification settings here. Here we have the ability to enter the notification type being off completely or CGC for the use with moisture cables, or the thresholds, which is where we're at right now. We have our low threshold and high threshold. We have our weekly temperature rise and our minimum temperature. At the bottom we have muting of sensors set to auto or manual muting. We have receive voltage alerts and receive exposed or covered sensor alerts. Notice that you do need to press update at the very bottom to make changes. Under the fans tab, we would have, if this bin had a fan controller hooked up to it, we would have similar settings to be able to start that fan or stop that fan or enter in a predestined amount of time that we want the fan to run for. On the last tab, we can see events where the system has automatically or manually muted or unmuted sensors, or if there's a flag such as halfway down it says bin full, that would be if all sensors in the bin are covered with grain. This concludes our BinSense Live walkthrough. and thank you very much for watching.